Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the wrestling hootenanny that is Wrestling with Egos. It is your boy, Brian, the intellectual savior of the wrestling masses. I am joined tonight by the big man, Isaac, and we have some wonderful news to share with the Wrestling with Egos public. That check, that big fat check from Intergalactic Radio cleared. And what we're going to be doing tonight is talking about our inductees into the Extreme Hall of Fame that is currently under construction in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. 10 acts that we think should waltz right into that Extreme Hall of Fame. Patrick is not with us tonight, but he will be back soon. He is on his 835th rendition of Roll Out the Barrel for the Cleveland Oktoberfest. He's flagging, but he's hanging in there, boys and girls. He appreciates all the cards and letters you've sent him. He appreciates your support. Big man, big weekend in wrestling. Clash at the Castle's happening. All Out is happening. We're going to react to all of it next week when we have the Reverend of the Rant and the Pastor of Pissed Off back with us. But Isaac, how are you? Maybe give us a little something you're looking forward to before we dive into this extreme business.
I'm extremely excited about this weekend. WWE, AEW both are putting on some shows, and I expect both of them to knock it out of the park. I don't expect a lot of titles to change, but I just want to see some exciting, good wrestling on both sides of those guys. So I'm excited to see what happens. I'm looking forward to it. And let's get into this. This is very exciting, ladies and gentlemen, because this is extreme wrestling guys that do some crazy stuff. And we need to put them in the Hall of Fame and put them on the mantle now.
Well, we'll get into it. The thing I'm excited about this weekend is there's people that I know all of us on this show care quite a bit about who are finally being featured in prominent roles. And the one that I'm thinking of is Shayna Baszler is about to get a chance at the Women's Championship on SmackDown. And I feel like if there's a title that's going to change hands, that might be the one that does. Because Liv Morgan has come a long way. I don't think that 99 times out of 100 she can be expected to hang with somebody like Shayna Baszler with her pedigree.
Or Ronda.
So that's my fearless prediction, sure to go wrong for this weekend. The Extreme Hall of Fame, the criteria was wide open. I was talking with the big man during the week, and I said, Big man, I like this idea about the Extreme Hall of Fame. Let's build one. And I just kind of left it at that. You know, you bring your 5 names, I'll bring my 5 names, and we'll just induct them. I was pleased to see that in the pre-show meeting there was no arguing really about, oh, he doesn't deserve to be in there, or they don't deserve to be in there, or anything like that. There's going to be some names that are like, okay, yeah, I'd put those people in there for sure. And there's going to be some names that are going to make you go, I need to maybe research some more about some of these people and figure it out. So, Big Man, I'm going to throw it to you first. Would you please give us your first inductee into the 2022 class of the Extreme Hall of Fame, and maybe some of their credentials that merit them inclusion?
Okay, first off, myself and the intellectual savior have decided that there are certain people that he agrees with me on, and some that he doesn't agree with me on. That's okay, and we can debate a little bit about it. But first inductee, and no debate, hardcore legend Terry Funk. The Funkster has been doing the craziest stuff, period, for, I don't want to say 2 or 3 decades, because I think it's close to 40 years.
At least.
Hardcore matches, barbed wire matches, you name it, he's done it. He's put companies on his back. He specifically was the first ECW champion, and they bet the farm on him because of all the things that he's done in his career and based it off of what he did. Based on his name alone, he goes in. And I'm not saying that this goes in any particular order, because I don't want you to sit here and say, well, so-and-so should have been before him. I'm not saying that.
No, this is just, we're picking these names out of a hat at random, basically. We put the list, we talked about it, we agreed on it. The thing that sticks with me about Terry Funk, I bet I know about 3% of what he's done, because long before he was in ECW and long before he was in the WWE, he was, you picked the territory, he was a part of it. I know that him and his brother, Dory were tag champions for World Class, maybe, or WCW.
These
and
guys,
they started out down in Texas. I mean, you pick all the little tiny little tiny promotions that were down in Texas at the time. They were setting the standard for hard-nosed, smash-mouth, in-your-face matches. And there's some people out there who think that Dory might have just been a little bit tougher than Terry.
That may be true, but let's not sit here and as Berman.
For the purpose of the discussion tonight, I mean, I know that Dory never really did a lot of the extreme stuff that Terry started doing. I think Terry saw it as another way to be viable and to help a promotion out, especially when he was doing the stuff with ECW. And then the stuff he did in WWF as Chainsaw Charlie, for the little bit that he was there to help advance Mick Foley's storyline. The most I know about Terry Funk is actually from the Beyond the Mat documentary that came out.
Forgot about that.
Terry Funk was a big part of that documentary, and it was his daughter, I think, that
daughter was getting married, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. We'll have to go back and double check that, or if someone would like to.
But just listening to his daughter talk about him, and there was obviously pride there, but there was remorse, but there was pride. I wish, I wish he didn't have to do all of these things to make a name for himself, but I'm proud of him, and that sort of thing. So I mean, the Funker obviously, I mean, just off if all he would have done was the stuff in ECW, like you brought up, and it's a very eloquent point you brought up about the powers that be in ECW staking their reputation on a guy like Terry Funk. Why is somebody like Terry Funk going to win this three-way dance over Shane Douglas and was it Shane Douglas and Raven with Terry Funk?
I believe it was.
I could three-way dance.
Be wrong, but
I know Shane Douglas was in there. But to say that ECW just starting out, trying to get notoriety, trying to get their feet on the ground, says, okay, Terry Funk's going to be our first champion. That's a difficult decision to make. They made it, and it paid off for them because it was a way of paying him back for all of the knocks he took over his career. So
it's very similar to what, I don't want to compare ECW to AEW, but in many ways, they wanted to have an established champion be their first champion, very similar to what AEW did in the fact that they had their first champion being Chris Jericho. We know who Chris Jericho is. He is respected all over the world. When you say Chris Jericho, he's the champion. Okay, I know him. I can get behind him. And that's one of the other things that they did, specifically when it comes to the Funkster.
My first nominee is going to surprise some people because the people out there wrestling with Eagles are going to be like, Brian, I didn't know you knew about this cat. I do. I've seen some of his matches, and I've seen his Dark Side of the Ring documentary, and I don't know that I'd want to be across the ring from this man. And I'm talking about Bruiser Brody. Bruiser Brody, to me, when I think of Extreme, he's the first name that pops into my head. Because on this show, quite a bit, we've talked about the grand timeline of wrestling. If you're looking at the Extreme timeline, there's not a lot that happens before Bruiser Brody starts making a name for himself, because all across the globe, this man perfected this style of wrestling. You know, I'm not going to follow the rules. I'm not going to stay in the ring. I'm not going to respect the fans' personal space. I'm not going to respect the booker. I'm not going to, I'm going to make myself, I'm going to make myself suffer. I'm going to make my opponent suffer. I mean, what I remember a lot about Bruiser Brody was some of the promotions he would do this in, he was only in them one time because they would never ask him back. Like, I remember there were some matches he had in Japan where they didn't know that this was what was going to happen, and yet here we are. And you look at the body type of Bruiser Brody. I mean, I think he was 6'8" or 6'9", and he had that wild hair and the beard and everything like that. And he just had, we're going to be saying this about a lot of these people on this list, had no regard for his own body. That's, excuse me, I think one of the calling cards of being an extreme wrestler is you're going to be making some withdrawals from your own personal livelihood every time you step in the ring. This is not, Kenny Omega is not on this list, boys and girls. One of the few lists he wouldn't show up on. Your thoughts on Bruiser Brody?
When I think of Bruiser Brody, I think of one of the toughest sons of bitches to ever be a wrestler. Period. End of story. I'm not going to question anything. I agree with you on all points when it comes to him, because you didn't know what he was going to do. Your opponent didn't know what he was going to do. And you were basically doing improv, because sometimes a lot of wrestlers like to get together and say, hey, I want to hit this spot. I want to hit this spot. I want to do this. When I keep thinking of something like that, I keep thinking of the Young Bucks and Super Kick Party. I gotta hit this spot, this spot, this spot.
Yeah.
You didn't know this was coming. You didn't know this was going on. He was sane, but he was nuts. You know what I mean?
Because that's something else I remember hearing about him, is that when you just had a regular conversation with the guy, he was very eloquent, very thought-provoking, very, very even keel. But then you get in the ring with him, and he turns into a demon, basically.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's what I think of Bruiser Brody. I think he should be in. We're not even questioning Bruiser Brody. We're not questioning this at all.
So who is joining Terry Funk and Bruiser Brody on this hit parade?
Okay, next one, and everyone will agree. If you don't, please come see me. No, I mean, come see me. The name, Mick Foley. I don't care what incarnation, whether it's Cactus Jack, Dude Love, Mick, Mankind, whatever. I don't really think we need to dive deeply into why Mick Foley's in this Extreme Hall of Fame at all. Do I need to say Hell in the Cell, Undertaker? Enough said. His matches against my first guy, Terry Funk, over in Japan. Oh my God. His match where he put so many people over. Rock, Edge, taking bumps he shouldn't be taking.
Randy Orton.
Yeah.
And lest we forget, he lost an ear in that match with Terry Funk in Japan. Or no, Germany. That was in Germany.
That wasn't against Terry Funk. That was against Vader.
Oh, that's right. I thought that was a match against Terry Funk. I'm sorry.
No. Let's right there. Boom. if you would really like to argue with this with me, come see me. But you got, I'm mic dropping this right there. Boom, Mick Foley, he's in, no questions.
I think the thing with Mick Foley is, Mick realized very early on in his career that because of the skill set that he brought to the table, he was going to have to do something out of the ordinary to get a job and keep the job, kind of thing. He was going to have to throw his body off of stuff. He was going to have to, break the mold of what a wrestler is, because he's been quoted as saying, I didn't have the physique of some of these other people. I didn't have the physique of a Shawn Michaels or a Kevin Nash or, a Sting,
or a Luger or
right.
something.
So he was going to have to put himself through peril in order to carve out a niche for himself. And the most obvious place he did that was in WWE, but he turned some heads in WCW early on.
He turned some heads over in Japan with some of the shit that he was doing.
Yeah.
Let's not get it twisted. That dude was doing some crazy stuff. And
one of the books that he wrote, there's a list of like all the injuries that he has suffered, and I dare say that all the most of the people on this list could make up a similar list, but we're talking God knows how many concussions, broken arms, broken hands, broken ankles, broken clavicle, this, that, the other. I mean, it's just, I think he ruptured his spleen once. I think he, it goes with the territory, unfortunately.
I just want to make mention of this real quick. Mick Foley's book, Have a Nice Day, is a fantastic read, and for the simple fact that he can remember all of the things that he can remember after taking all of the hundreds of chair shots and him falling off things that he shouldn't have done, is amazing. The recollection that he had. Those are some really good reads. And if you get a chance, check them out. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, and I have had the good fortune of meeting him. I met him. He came through his comedy tour, came to Cuyahoga Falls in, I believe 2015.
I remember the picture.
2014 or 2015, I think. And he was a pleasure to listen to. He's a pleasure to talk to in the autograph line before it all started. Just a very, self-deprecating person, and, a genuine human being. So, I mean, I have zero qualms with Mick Foley waltzing into this Extreme Hall of Fame. Another name that we can't talk about Extreme without mentioning, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul Heyman. And I'm the man that built a promotion catering to this style of wrestling, because I realized the fans had an appetite for it. And I wanted to cater to the fan base that was in Philadelphia at the time. You cannot have a conversation about Extreme without the promoter of the or the lead promoter of the company that championed it, in my opinion. And that's not even talking about what he's been able to do as a manager, what he's been able to do as a backstage personality, what he's been able to do on commentary,
Finding talent.
Mm-hmm.
Things such as that nature as well. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But yeah, when you sit here and you talk about Paul Heyman, he's evil genius. He's also at certain times he's his own worst enemy, as people have said in the past. But I have no qualms about what he's done and accomplished, and put him right in immediately.
Because it's a roll of the dice to take that form of entertainment, that brand of wrestling, and say, we are not only going to encourage our wrestlers to do it, but we're going to, every match is just going to be Extreme Rules. You want to use a chair, go ahead. You know, you want to use a table, go ahead. You want to set the table on fire, go ahead. You want to use a forklift, go ahead. You want to dive off the bleachers, go ahead. You know,
you want to use a car.
What?
You want to use a car.
Yeah, you want to use a car. You know, but to take it from, you know, what Eastern Championship Wrestling was in its infancy to what Extreme Championship Wrestling became, you know, it took a lot of just throwing caution to the wind and saying, you know what, we're going to try this, and if it doesn't work, we'll try something else. Then we'll come back the next day and we'll try something else. And he's like that football coach that you want to run through a brick wall for. You know, he took people that the establishment of wrestling did not think were marketable or dependable or that people would come and see, and turn them into superstars. You know, a lot of the names on this list came through ECW, and we know of them and we are fans of them because of what they did in ECW.
I just want to also mention when we talk about Paul Heyman, we talk about who he found and who has come through ECW at one point in time. We can talk about WWE legends and Hall of Famers. We can mention Lita. We can mention the Dudley Boys. We can mention Raven. We can mention Stone Cold Steve Austin at one point in time. We can sit here and mention, you know, Mick Foley, Terry Funk. We can mention a bunch of people. You know, we can also mention the Luchadors, Rey Mysterio, Psychosis. You know, you can sit here and look at those guys, Dean Malenko, you know, Eddie Guerrero, one name that won't be mentioned, who's no longer with us.
He you know, he really did, you know, push the envelope, because the luchadors and the cruiserweights were his way of making sure that, okay, if you're more of a traditionalist, you can still come and watch our shows because you'll have your day in the sun. But he was really great at understanding the pulse of the room. He's in Philadelphia. That crowd had a hunger for that kind of wrestling at that point. You know, they were into what Rob Van Dam was doing. They were into what Sabu was doing. They were into what Taz was doing and stuff like that. So he just said, this is what they want, you know. And when they would take it to other cities, they found there was an appetite for it there too. When they would come to Cleveland, when they would come to New York, when they would come to St. Louis, when they would come to, you know, wherever they were going, there is a percentage of the wrestling public out there that wants to consume this type of content. So I just believe that the fact that he's willing to stake an entire promotion on it and succeed for a while and be recognized and revered for it merits him inclusion on this list.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
Who's up next for you?
Okay, I mentioned two. I'm going to mention the next person on my list. Is a super old school wrestler. He did not have the body of anybody. And that's me being nice. He makes Mick Foley look like he's Lex Luger. And I'm referring to Abdullah the Butcher. And Abdullah the Butcher was a big, overweight, just
mammoth of a man.
mammoth of a man who was more revered for basically just carving you up in every way, shape, and form, and carving himself up. And if you ever see a picture of the man, like right now, you see just grains embedded in his head because he would stab himself with a fork. And he's going to stab you with a fork. He's going to use weapons. And that's what he did.
He's a guy, I understand why he's on the list, but his style never connected with me. And I don't know why that, and I don't know why it is. Maybe I need to give it more of a shot, but I just, I don't know what it is about Abdullah the Butcher. He's just one of those cats that, like all the other people that we're talking about, like there's an escalation to get to where they want to go. Like with Mick Foley, he didn't start off with, the dumpster and the flaming table and the this and the that. I mean, he worked his way up to it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like Abdullah the Butcher was ready to do that within the first 10 seconds of the match.
You look at Abdullah the Butcher, and I look back at some of his matches, and you don't look at him as a big man that can move. When you think of big men that can move, like right now, you think of somebody. I want to say
Keith Lee.
Keith Lee. That man's doing stuff that Rey
Karrion
Mysterio
Kross was another one.
When I look at Keith Lee, I look at him as like a luchador, like an early Rey Mysterio type of dude, doing moves like that. Abdullah the Butcher was nothing like that. He didn't have the mobility to do that stuff. It was a different style. It was a different era.
So your argument is that he basically had to go to that right away because the match wasn't going to last very long. I know what the people came for. Let me give it to them, kind of thing.
Absolutely. I'm here for blood, and I'm here to carve this guy up, and now I'm going to the back and probably drinking some beer. That was. I mean, it's not like you could sit here and say, well, you know what, he's a vegetarian. I mean, you know what I'm saying? But that's the type of.
I'll have another cold beer.
Or 5. But you get that idea coming from Abdullah the Butcher. You see that he did a lot of just stuff that you were just like, oh my God, I can't deal with it. We were young when he was still wrestling, and I saw that like, oh my God, this is crazy. This dude's nuts.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but he's another one who kind of jumped from promotion to promotion because a lot of the promoters didn't want to be associated with that kind of, because in the territory area, you had to be careful about the kind of the kind of stuff you were producing, because there were state laws and athletic commission laws that prevented certain things from happening, and you get shut down if something like that was allowed to continue. So that's another reason why Abdullah the Butcher was kind of a gypsy in terms of, he's over on the West Coast and then he's going over to Japan and then he's going over to, Europe, and then he's coming back over to Florida, and then he's going to Texas, and he's going with whoever would have him.
Yeah, I agree totally.
So another name that I think merits inclusion on this list, because it's one thing to just be extreme with weapons, but it's totally another thing to have psychology along with it, and that's where Raven comes in. Raven has done some great psychological mind game work along with the extreme nature of his wrestling in ECW, in WCW, and in WWE. And I'm sure there's some other promotions that I'm not thinking about too. In fact, absent Paul Heyman, I actually think Raven is probably the best promo on this list that we have. Because I'm looking at it, I mean, Mick Foley gave some decent ones. Brody and Abdullah were, Brody was a good talker. I'll give him that. But I think, and the Dudley Boys, that was, not to put the cart before the horse, but they're more incendiary than they are thought-provoking. So that's why, to me, I think Raven, as far as mic skills, to borrow some GOAT discussion fodder, probably is the best promo on this list for somebody not named Paul Heyman.
When I think of Raven, I think of someone that is extremely, extremely, extremely intelligent. I put him on the list of Paul Ellering. Paul Ellering as he would be the manager, as we all know, was the manager of the Road Warriors, would always come to the ring and he'd have a newspaper and he'd be hitting his hand with it. That was the New York Times that he was hitting his hand with, and he was reading it every day before he actually went out to the ring with the Road Warriors. And he managed the Road Warriors' money very well and kept them at bay, thank God, because if you lost the Road Warriors stuff at an airport, God help you. Seriously, God help you. But Raven was this person that was playing chess when everyone else was playing checkers. And he was thinking 10 steps ahead. He he's actually the one that made Kurt Angle decide not to go to ECW. If you actually go back and watch, because at that particular show, Paul Heyman gave people the idea of creative freedom. That was actually the specific night that they stringed up Tommy Dreamer to a cross, and and Kurt Angle was like, "Oh hell no, I'm out of here." And if you think about it, that's really pushing the limits. And
That's out there.
That's extremely super hardcore. And just to think that you're going to do this and try something like that is 10 steps above anyone else is doing.
I'll also give Raven credit because he also had a lot of people along with him for the ride. You know, he had the Ravens flock in WCW and then ECW too. He had a lot of people, you know, that he was helping give a spotlight to that maybe normally wouldn't have. You know, we'll put you with Raven and you'll do some good business. Guys like Stevie Richards and I'm trying to think of some of the other names of the people that were in that group.
Like Blue Meanie, if I'm not mistaken, was with him for a little bit.
Okay.
The people, but yeah.
So, I mean, you know, for me, you know, Raven combined the extreme with wrestling with the psychology. You know, a piece that's missing from a lot of these people's resumes. What's another name for you that you think should be on this list?
The suicidal, homicidal, extreme. I'm talking Sabu. Now, Sabu, now, we all know that Sabu wasn't the greatest talker because he never said a damn thing, pretty much ever. And when they inducted the Sheik, I was surprised he even spoke. let's just keep it real. But that dude was more mutilating to himself than mutilating to somebody else. There was not something he wouldn't try or do. He was a master with a chair. Whether it was having him jump over the third rope or jump onto somebody with a chair. The only other person that was better with a chair than him was his best friend, RVD. He did stuff that was just crazy. And he was amazingly athletic, but he did some stuff that you were like, oh my God, this is crazy. Him versus Taz, those build up for over a year was amazing.
Let me ask you a question about Sabu.
Sure.
Was that always his character, or did he kind of morph into that over time?
He was always that way. I don't think that from when I started watching him, I think it was always that way. I think that he knew that he had a niche in wrestling. That's what he was going to be. Even though he was athletic, and we all know he was extremely athletic. He could do a lot of things in that ring that a lot of people couldn't do. But that was just his thing. And
that's where I'm kind of like, there's some gaps in my knowledge base about Sabu. I didn't know if like early on, like when he was starting out, if he was just a guy, and then like a lot of wrestlers do, they find a character that works for them and they go with it, or if Sabu was like that from the get-go.
He was like that from the get-go when he got into ECW.
Okay.
And that's what they. I mean, him and Rob Van Dam both trained under the Sheik, his uncle, and he just trained. I mean, his uncle was like that. He he's not far. The doesn't fall far from the tree, and
Got
we'll
it.
leave it at that. So
So I've probably surprised some people with some of my entrants on this list. This next one, I wanted to take great pains with my nominees to make sure that it wasn't just okay. This person was in ECW, this person was in ECW, this person was in ECW, because there is still, even though ECW is no longer around, there is still a lot of places in this world where you can find extreme wrestling going on, and you can find people perfecting the art form. And I would argue that a current wrestler that deserves to be on this list would be one Nick Gage. Now, full disclosure, one of the only reasons I know about Nick Gage is because he was on AEW late last year during the Jericho MJF angle, the 5 Labors of Jericho, where one of the things he had to do was wrestle Nick Gage in a GCW style, match, and you had the pizza cutter, thing with the Domino's commercial and all that crap. But then I want to say it was over like around Christmas time. I went on Hulu and they had released some more Dark Side of the Ring episodes. And I watched the Nick Gage episode. And I came away with some respect for the man. Because he's another one of these guys. I like guys that bet on themselves. And Nick Gage has done things unapologetically his way, and he doesn't care what you think about it. Probably doesn't care what I think about it. He'd probably watch this episode of Wrestling with the Eagles and say, that I don't need your adulation or anything like that. And I would say, well, that's okay, Mr. Gage. I respect you. But he strikes me as a guy who is just as comfortable in some on some church parking lot doing a show as he was in Daly's place or wherever it was that they did that episode with the match with Jericho.
I think those before the pandemic.
Yeah.
Crowd. I could be wrong. Please, if I'm wrong, please someone write in and tell us or leave
And
us.
that's the part about the extreme that I think we don't say enough about. It's a niche product. You're probably not going to sell out a 75,000 seat football stadium, on the backs of an extreme show. This is going to be, this is the style of wrestling that you're going to have 300 people maybe in an armory, or 75 people in a high school parking lot, or in a mall somewhere in Schenectady, that kind of thing.
I want to say this is something that he is a few years behind in the aspect of he would have fit perfectly in ECW in a hardcore match against a Sabu or going up against somebody like the late Bam Bam Bigelow.
Oh, he wouldn't be out of place against any of these guys. I mean, he could more than hold his own because with Nick Gage, what I noticed too is there's some technique there. There's some grappling, but then there's also, I'm going to set up the fluorescent light tubes and we're going to get it on, and I'm going to set up the, I'm going to get the pizza cutter out of my combat pants and we're going to get it on, and all that kind of stuff, because again, he knows what the people came to see. So he'll give you a little bit of wrestling, but then we're going to get to what all the people came to see. But there were parts of that Dark Side of the Ring documentary that made me uncomfortable. A lot of the Dark Side of the Ring documentaries make me uncomfortable. That's the whole point. It's like to say it's not just the glitz and the glamour. There's a soft underbelly that we're going to show you too. But again, another example of and I can't remember if it's his wife or it's his girlfriend or whoever is like talking about it and saying I support him, and that I love a relationship like that where the significant other just supports you and wants you to follow your dreams and wants you to be happy. Because that's really what it's all about at the end of the day is what is it that makes you happy? And that's the biggest reason why I included him on this list was because he's a current person that's doing this. A lot of these people now are retired or out of the game or passed away, unfortunately, in some cases. But Nick Gage is doing it now and making a decent living off of it, and he's got a following and a notoriety because of it.
I totally agree. Like I said, Nick Gage is doing. He would be a perfect implant for ECW back in the day. I like what he's doing. I like the way he's balancing things, and put him in the hall.
I'm thinking about Nick Gage versus Raven. Forgive me. That would be
Right.
the psychology there.
Right. Absolutely.
All right, you might as well drop it on me. I know you've been saving this one. You might as well drop it on me.
Okay. When we talk,
This is where I got to loosen my collar a little bit and just take a deep seat.
We talk about ECW. We talk about a lot of the people I've mentioned specifically have been ECW. This guy was ECW, not the whole embodiment of ECW, but he was a spoke in the wheel, and he was one of the craziest ones. And that person is the late New Jack. New Jack was extremely crazy. He was going to hurt you. You knew New Jack was going to throw you off of a building, off of a scaffold. He was going to hurt a lot of people. And New Jack got into that little situation. We all know which one we're talking about, where he was put in the ring with a guy specifically who falsified information, and he got hurt badly. New Jack specifically, I think it was, I don't know what he used, and I'm not gonna dignify it. Basically, the guy got hurt, and the fact that they put him in and no one knew who this kid was, he falsified information, and he got killed, and New Jack destroyed this kid. It was horrible. So I'm gonna sit here. I'll leave it at that.
I come down. When I was making the list, I thought about New Jack. And part of me thought, okay, Isaac's probably going to bring him up. This is a chance for there not to be overlap between our two lists. And I struggled with his inclusion just because of some of the incidents that he got into, because it wasn't just the mass transit incident. There were other ones. But what I will give New Jack credit for, he's another guy with, in a different way than Raven, but similar to him with the psychology of it. Because he brought his life story into things. And that really was not a character that he was portraying. That rage he would bring to the ring was informed by his life experience. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know exactly what that life experience is to be a person of color and be stereotyped and be, treated poorly because of the color of your skin. But you're not going to tell me that didn't inform the character that he portrayed and the way he went into the ring to try and hurt you. It was a way to get his frustrations out because of what he saw as a problem in society. So I think in that regard, I'll give him a check in the plus column because, okay, you're harnessing that anger and you're turning it into your line of work. Now, you're using a staple gun, which I don't agree with, but you know, I'll give him props for curating that character. You know, because he did have a following too. I mean, you can say that about all these guys in this list. They had a following. You know. But I just the kind of person I am, I wrestle with that one a little bit. Because of the conduct, because of the lawsuits, because of all of that stuff. And we're getting into a moral gray area, which is not why we're here. We're here to induct people into the Extreme Hall of Fame. So let's keep it light.
We're light, and we're mentioning a guy named New Jack, and then when the nose, I'm like, that's light.
New Jack, would you like some crudité? There's some great stuff over here. Come on over and have some. That is spell. Take a load off.
Exactly.
And I get why he's included. I won't say, oh no, he doesn't deserve to be on this list because a man's conduct should mean something. But that's not the argument we're here to have. You know, we're talking about professional wrestlers and conduct. You know,
And extreme.
Yeah, extreme. So Isaac, why don't we wrap your list up with your final inclusion into this list? Or did you? Wait a minute.
I get my 5. This is yours. The last one is you. I gave my 5.
Okay, you did, because New Jack was your 5th. I thought we had one more to go. I'm not following the call sheet. I'm very sorry, ladies and gentlemen.
That's okay.
That's the first thing they taught me in podcast school was follow your notes, and I didn't do that. My final entrant into our class of the Extreme Hall of Fame is actually the only instance of a tag team on this list. And we're talking about the Dudley Boys, and you might as well include all of them, not just Devon and Bubba Ray. I mean, there was like 4 or 5 other ones.
Big Dick Dudley, Spike Dudley,
Horace Dudley. Oh, I'm sorry, that there was no Horace Dudley. Simon Dean Dudley. I got to get that in because Patrick's not here to threaten to drag the house and beat me up.
Patrick is gonna be like, "Oh no, you didn't just say that."
We're gonna edit that out of the show.
He's gonna be like, "Tell me you didn't just say that." That's what he's gonna say.
The Dudley Boys. I dare say that tag teams in ECW were not really that like present until the Dudleys showed up. I don't think there were tag teams at the beginning. I mean, they had the Public Enemy and they had, you know, a few other ones, but it wasn't until the Dudleys showed up where you started seeing them do a little bit more with tag teams.
Let me say this: when it comes to ECW, there were a bunch of tag teams that were doing some crazy stuff. And Dudleys were one of them. I cannot remember every single tag team, but New Jack was in a tag team.
That's right.
You gotta think of Perry Saturn was in a tag team. Those dudes were doing stuff. You gotta remember Rob Van Dam and Sabu were tearing it up.
Right, they were a team.
There were so many teams that were doing the damn thing, but the team that stood out the most because everybody loves the table is the Dudleys, and they were not just doing the damn thing. They were pissing you off. They were talking about your mother, your sister, you know, doing things that were absolutely nuts.
They were incendiary, you know, and they were very good at it. And I remember the one clip of him getting in some old woman's face or something like that, and and again, it's what are you willing to do to be marketable, you know? And as you alluded to before, Paul Heyman was giving these people creative freedom to say pretty much anything they wanted, do anything they wanted in the ring, and Devon, and to a greater extent Bubba Ray, Because I think Bubba Ray was the more incendiary of the two, if I'm not mistaken. He's
Okay.
mellowed out a little bit now, but back then, some of those promos make me blush, Isaac. I'm not going to lie.
Oh, some of those promos make it's like when you sit there and watch Bubba Ray just tear up somebody and then talk about their sister and being this close to them, waiting for them to punch him in the face, and literally at time and almost every single night have to be escorted out of the building because these buffoons were pissing everybody off. You know, it's just, I mean, it's an art form in and of itself, but they were
Then
notorious.
when the time for talking was over and it was time to get in the ring, I mean, they were taking a backseat to nobody. There's a reason why the Dudleys were a GOAT episode a while back where we were talking about, you know, are they one of the greatest tag teams ever? Yes. You know, and
I do say, duh.
yeah, they were not afraid to do everything in their power to, you know, leave a mark on you and you know, they were main eventing several ECW pay-per-views. You know, the tag teams is the main event. So I mean, you know, that's something you don't see that often, as a tag team match being the main event of a pay-per-view.
I give you this in the aspect of we mentioned another person that will be in the hall sooner rather than later. But the Dudley's last match in ECW, everyone, as we all know at this point in time, the internet was running wild, and we knew if somebody was going to leave one company and go to the next. Well, it was already public knowledge, knowing that the Dudley boys were going to leave. ECW and going to the WWE. Their last match was for the titles. And we're like, are you kidding me? Why are they wrestling for the titles, the last match? Well, they wrestled for the last time, and you're sitting here saying to yourself, how, are they going to leave with the ECW titles? And all of a sudden, of course, Tommy Dreamer, Raven comes back and beats, them after they win the tag titles, when they're supposed to be leaving, like 2 seconds later. It's like, what the hell just happened? And another way that, that Paul Heyman and his brilliance, throwing things, doing things that you didn't expect, and things that curveballs that kept coming at you, you're like, I didn't see that coming. I didn't see that. There was no way this was supposed to happen. But these guys could go. And whether them using tables, flaming tables, cheese graters, in those specific matches where they say, bring whatever you want to bring and we'll use it matches.
So I dare say that the one word you could use to describe this class of 10 is legendary.
Absolutely.
Please, everybody out there in Wrestling with Egos Land, come on out to the Hall of Fame. Make sure you visit that gift shop. Make sure you visit the food court, because there's an excellent corn dog down there that I hear is delicious and delectable. You got to try it. We're going to end it there because we need to go drag Patrick off the karaoke bar, because he's been hogging the karaoke bar for the last hour, and people are leaving because of it. So we got to take the microphone away from him before he, disturbs the public anymore.
He's been singing Rick Ashley for the past half hour, so we got
no. Oh, yeah, everybody's getting rickrolled. We don't need that.
We don't want to do that to you. We got to help.
So we're wrapping it up there. Big wrestling weekend. Check out Clash at the Castle. Check out All Out. We'll be reacting to it next week. So for the disembodied voice of Patrick Swafford, for the big man, Isaac, for myself, the intellectual savior of the wrestling masses, Brian, please don't forget to interact with the show. It's at WrestlingXEgos on Twitter. Please follow us on Facebook. Thank you for watching us on YouTube and listening to us on all the podcast platforms: Google, Spotify, Breaker, Anchor, Apple, etc. Leave a comment, leave a 5-star review. Is there somebody that we did not talk about tonight that you think should have been included in this class of the Extreme Hall of Fame? We'd love to hear from you. But until we meet again, this is Brian and Isaac, and getting extreme is one of the reasons why we love professional wrestling. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.